Now let's get to the diacritical variants, and these are probably the ones that caused the Muslims the most anger when we introduced them 3 years ago here in London. What do we mean by diacritical variants? Except for 2 of you, the rest of you don't know what I'm talking about. So let's help you and unpack it. So
now, if you add the 20 plus the 10, you now have 30 official Qur'an, 30 official different Qur'ans. And when Muhammad Hijab held that blank piece of paper, well, he pretended he had a blank piece of paper. What are you going to write on this? He said. What are you going to write? Is it going to be the Khalun? Is it going to be the Hafs? Is it going to be the Wash? Is it going to be the Al-Duri? Which one of the now 30 that you scholars, you're the ones who have introduced this, you're the ones who have claimed and have known about this for over 1,000 years. Which one are you going to put? Which one are you going to write? And we remember that infamous interview where Yasir Qadhi says, this is not something you bring into the open. This is not something we discuss on camera. And in just 20 minutes, and over again for 25 to 26 minutes, he tried to remonstrate against our good friend Muhammad Hijab, who really wanted an answer. So this is what we're going to get into now, and this is what we need to move into. I talked about this in the film that I gave there in London. So let's go in and let's unpack what we mean by this Qur'an. Let's help you understand why this is so significant and why also this is so damaging.
Welcome to Events and History, where we explore the origins, teachings, and historical development of Islam with a fact-based, analytical approach.
Have you ever wondered if the Quran we see today is truly the Quran that was supposedly revealed over 1,400 years ago? What if everything you thought you knew about its formation was only part of the story? In this video, Dr. J. Smith dives deep into a revelation that's shaking centuries-old assumptions: the existence of multiple Quranic versions, or Qur'at, with dozens of variations in readings, diacritical marks, and vowels. From early manuscripts in Yemen and Tashkent to the canonical version chosen centuries later, you'll discover how these differences have shaped and challenged the way the Quran has been transmitted. Dr. J explores why scholars kept some variants hidden, why debates erupted when they were revealed, and how these textual nuances could change our understanding of key passages. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or simply curious about history, this video uncovers truths that have been largely overlooked, truths that may leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the Quran. Let's watch the video.
Now we're going to go back to the material that's caused all the hullabaloo in the last about month or so. When back May the 19th, my good friend Shabir Ali finally admitted, after how many years have we debated on this, finally admitted that there was more than one Quran, that there were many different dialects, as he kept on saying, many different qira'at or ahruf. That was on May 19th. He was doing a lecture for the Ramadan series that he does every year. Didn't know how explosive that was, and I think the reason why is because he's never said this before. And here's what's out to me: how is it, after all these years of all the debates I've had with him, all the time he's always said there's only one Quran, only one Quran. He's always made that known. He has never ventured right or left on that. And then suddenly, on May 19th, a little over a month ago, he finally admits, well, actually, no, there are a number of different Qurans that don't agree, that don't have the same writings, that do have different dots and do have different vowels, and they do say different things as a result. Why suddenly has he admitted that in just this year, 2020, when he never admitted that back in the 1900s? He never admitted that in all the 6 debates that I've ever had with him on the Quran and the Bible. Now he's admitting that. What's going on? What's going on? And we need to get back and we need to understand this because this was really brought to the fore on June the 8th when Muhammad Hijab had that infamous interview with Yasir Qadhi, where he asked him this very thing. What about these qira'at? What about these different readings? How is it you can have one Quran and yet have not 2, up to 30 different readings, different ways of reading the same text? 30 different Qurans. 30 different Qurans. 7 which were the first official, made official by Ibn Mujahid in 936. Another 3 that were added in 1429 by Al-Jazari. And then each of those 7 plus 3 makes 10. Each of those 10 had to students or to transmitters that came after, who now, if you add the 20 plus the 10, you now have 30 official, 30 official different Qur'ans. And when Muhammad Hijab held that blank piece of paper, well, he pretended he had a blank piece of paper. What are you going to write on this? He said. What are you going to write? Is it going to be the Qalun? Is it going to be the Hafs? Is it going to be the Wash? Is it going to be the Al-Duri? Which one of the now 30 that you scholars, you're the ones who have introduced this, you're the ones who have claimed and have known about this for over 1,000 years. Which one are you going to put? Which one are you going to write? And we remember that infamous interview where Yasser Qadi says, this is not something you bring into the open. This is not something we discuss on camera. And in just 20 minutes, and over again for 25 to 26 minutes, he tried to remonstrate against our good friend Muhammad Hijab, who really wanted an answer. So this is what we're going to get into now, and this is what we need to move into. I talked about this in the film that I gave there in London back on September 2019. So let's go in and let's unpack what we mean by this qira'ah. Let's help you understand why this is so significant and why also this is so damaging. All right? So, back to the film.
Now let's get to the diacritical variants, and these are probably the ones that caused the Muslims the most anger when we introduced them 3 years ago here in London. What do we mean by diacritical variants? Except for two of you, the rest of you don't know what I'm talking about. So let's help you and unpack it so we can see what's going on. Take a look at those two manuscripts. Can you notice there's no dots above and below the lines, right? That is straight razm consonantal text. The consonantal text is what is known as razm in Arabic. That's the Samarkand manuscript, which is in Tashkent. Over here is the Sana manuscript, which is in Yemen. Both of these are 8th century documents. And you can see there's no vowels, there's no curlicue for the dhamma, there's no line at the top for the fatha, and there's no line below for the kasra, the u, the a, and the e sound. There's 3 vowels in Arabic with the long vowels as well. That's why when you look at these, how do you know what you're reading? You can't read it, and that's why from the very beginning you can see it's a very inexact text. So in Arabic, as I said earlier, there are 28 letters.
Right, so what's going on here? Well, and this is something that I'm getting lots of emails from, so let me just back up before I move into these letters. Listen, I can understand an awful lot of you do not understand Arabic. I'm not going to sit there and just do an Arabic lesson, but the 28 letters that I'm going to introduce now are modern standard Arabic. This is what they use today, all right? This is the confusion I think most people have. Back in the 7th century, they didn't have these 28 letters. I've tried to find out how many they existed, and I've been getting different reports. Let's just go with 16. We do know at least 16 letters, maybe a little fewer than that. But 16 letters existed at the time of Uthman, at the time of Muhammad, at the time of the 7th century, from the Arabic we're getting. Now, it's fluid. I cannot be definitive on that. That's as far as I'm going to say today. So at least 16 letters but these letters had many more different words, different variations of words, and that's why it was obvious to the readers that the context suggested many other words existed in those groupings of 3 letters at a time. Because that's what most Arabic words are always at the base, are made up of 3 letters. And that's why they needed to start adding different dots, and these are the dots above and below the lines. These are the diacritical dots. And later on, this was done. Now, there were some dots there in the 7th century. I'm not saying there were no dots, because we do have examples of inscriptions that have some dots in them. Whether they were added later, we don't know. But let's just go ahead and say that there were some dots. But this was not well known, and this was not standardized. And that's why the 2 manuscripts, the Samarkand and the Sana manuscript that I showed, don't have dots in them at all. And the ones that start to have dots, more than likely, like the Topkapi, they're in a different color and they were added at a different date, a later date. So without these dots and without these vowels, there are so many different ways that you can read the same sentence or read the same verse. And that's why dots needed to be added. And so they were starting to be standardized in about the mid to late 8th century. So by the late 8th century, they had now standardized, they had dots. As I'm going to show you, dots above and below the lines. And once these dots were there, then they could start coming up with many different variants or sorry, many different variations of words. That's the problem. Which dots are you going to put? Once you invent the dots, you need to know which go up where. So let's go back to the lecture and see what they came up with.
So in Arabic, as I said earlier, there are 28 letters. But 6 of the letters are unique. The Aleph, the Kaf, the Lam, the Mim, the Ha, and the Waw. Those are the 6 letters that don't need any dots. They always remain the same regardless of where they're found in the word. The other 22 all need dots. What do I mean by that? Well, take a look at that smiley face. One smiley face. You put 1 dot above it, it's a nun. 2 dots above it, it becomes a ta. 3 dots above it, it becomes a tha. That same smiley face, if you put 1 dot below it, becomes a ba. 2 dots below it, it becomes a ya. Which means you can get 5 different letters with just 1 smiley face. Na, ta, tha, ba, ya. Can you see the dilemma? How, therefore, can you read when Arabic unless you have the dots? If you put 3 of those smiley faces together, one after another, you can get 19 different words depending on where you put the dots. Now, Al-Fadi says he can actually get 31 different words, but that's because he knows Arabic so much better than the rest of us from Saudi Arabia. Why is that important? Well, this is where the qira'at and ahruf come into being. Does anybody know what I'm talking about when I say qira'at and ahruf? These are the diacritical differences. Because of the fact that there are so many diacritical possibilities to put those dots in anywhere, you can imagine that there's going to be whole schools of differences depending on what reading you're going to give. And when you hear about the readings, they're talking about this. So in the 8th and 9th century, you had different schools that were creating completely different Qur'ans with different readings, and here they are. These are just 26 of the 32 we now have here in London. We've gone around the world and we've now found them. Hatun Tash is the one that's done this. Hatun Tash, she has found them in Morocco, she's found them in Jordan, she's found them in Yemen. Just those 3 countries she's come up with now, it's 32. Well, I'm even behind times.
So you have to give an awful lot of credit to Hatun Tash for the great work she has done. But I want to show you these because it's good that you at least see the 26 that we were introducing, that we did introduce back in 2016. So I'm going to go ahead and show you these 26 one at a time so you get the idea. We're not just talking about pieces of paper. We're not just talking about scraps here and there. These are actual complete Qur'ans. Every one of them are complete Qur'ans, and every one of them is in Arabic. So let's go look at them. So we have Al-Susi first, and then we have Abi Jafar. Then we move over to Yaqub. From there, we go to Duri, Abi Amr al-Basri, then Ibn Amir. From there, Khalaf al-Ashar. Excuse me, my Arabic. I know I'm desecrating the language, but then that's always the case when you're a foreigner. Al-Layth ibn Khalid. Warsh, that's the first Warsh. This is the Azraq way. Then you have the Warsh al-Asbahani way. Then you have Ibn Jamaz. Duri again, Abi Amr al-Ala. Khalaf al-Shatabiya way. And then you have al-Kisai. Here you have Shu'bah ibn Ayan ibn Salem al-Asid al-Nahshali al-Kufi. Here you have al-Iman Abd ibn Khatir. From there you have Isham ibn Amir al-Bazi again. Khalaf, Shu'bah once again. And here you Imam ibn Amir al-Damashki from Damascus. Qalun al-Shamiyah. Ibn Kathir. Warsh once again. Khrao. Shu'bah once again. And we end with Qalun. So those are the 26 that we held up there in 2016. Hatun has now found 37 of the 30 that are official. The first 7 which were then made authoritative by Ibn Mujahid in 936, or between 916 and 936. That's the 10th century. Then you had 3 that were added to those 7 by Al-Jazari in 1429. And then you had your transmitters, 2 of each from each one of the first 7 plus 3, which is 10. So that makes 20 transmitters. You look at the 20 transmitters plus the 7 plus the 3, and you get 30 official Qur'ans, 30 official different Qira'at variations. You're looking at 26 in front of you. Can you then understand why this has caused so much consternation in the Muslim world?
Now you'll notice that the ones that I have just put up there, these are not complete, obviously, because there are 30. These are the 30 official ones that are now considered by scholars to be those that are chosen, the 7 plus the 3, as I said, and the 20. She had 26 that she had been able to collect. That's Hatun back in 2016. You will have heard Warsh more than once. You will have heard Shoba or Shuba more than once. Also Kalun more than once, and also Ibn Kathir. Fascinating, because they are different ones of the same name. The one you didn't hear, of course, is the Hafs, this one here, the Hafs. And Khatun now has 7 different Hafs. So this is the one that was finally chosen. That's not in the list that she put up there, because every one of those are different from this one, the one that was chosen in the last century. Let me just show you a picture of the 7 right here. Can you see this is not really well known yet, and it's not really well documented yet. Since 2016, she has found another 11. So she's up to 37 different ones. And so we will need to go putting those up and start introducing them. And Hatun's going to be doing that on her channel, or she may have already, come to think of it. But can you see then why we're unlocking these? Now, we do need to go back and see where these 30 came from. So let's go back to the lecture and let's continue. Pick it up from there.
Now, every one of these that come from 5 different cities, those are the 5 cities: Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Kufa, and Basra. These 5 cities in the 9th and 10th century, especially, late 8th century, 9th and 10th century, they were coming up with so many different variations of the Quran, depending on where the dots were, that they each had their own Quran, and they each started their own schools. And if you look at these brown areas, these brown clouded areas, you can see Al-Bazi there had 1,054 differences from the Quran that we use today. Qalum had 1,700 differences. Hisham had 1,300 differences. Come on down to Abu al-Harith, and he had 5,000 differences. I've just looked at 23 of these Qurans, and we've already found 93,000 differences. Just by looking at 23. These are all Arabic Qurans. The differences are all in the diacritical marks and in the vowelization, but primarily the diacritical marks. And that's why when Muslims are talking about this, usually when they're talking about different Qurans, they're talking about the qira'ats. And what most Muslims will say, these are all the same. The problem is there is one that was chosen because since there's so many differences, they had to come up with one canonical version, and they came up with this man right here, Hafs. Hafs is the one that was chosen, but look when he died, 796. So he died in the late 8th century. His Quran is 144 years after Muhammad. Does that bother any of you? It gets worse. Let's continue on. When you look at the examples of these variants, most Muslims will say they don't make any difference, and they'll usually use this example. This is the one they always use in chapter 1, verse 4, where on the side, Hafs here, you have Maliki, the owner of the day, versus Maliki, which is the king. Well, it could be the only owner of the day, or it could be the king of the day of recompense. The king is the owner. So therefore, there's no difference. On face value, I would agree. But that's not what we're finding in other ones. Here's another one. In chapter 3, verse 146, you have Qatala on the left, and over here with Warsh, which is very popular in northern Africa, you have Qutila, were killed. So, and how many prophets fought versus and how many prophets were killed? Well, if I was a prophet, I would rather fight than be killed. So this would have a huge significance to me if I were one of them. Here you have another example, Surah 38, Ayah 45, where you have Ibadana, dagger aleph is added, and in this one there is no dagger aleph. It's the Abdana. Abdana, no dagger aleph. One is slaves, plural, the other is slave. And remember our slaves Ibrahim, Ishaq, and Yaqub. Well, obviously that should be a plural, so Hafs has it correct. Al-Bazi has slave, yet he's talking about owner, so you can see it doesn't even agree with the subject. So you can see that there is a grammatical error built into that. Surah 43, ayah 19, you have ibadu on the left, you have ra, inda on the right. One says slaves on the left, the other says in the presence. So, and they make the angels who are slaves of the beneficent, or according to ra, and they make angels who are in the presence of the beneficent females. Now, two problems. Are the angels slaves of Allah or simply in the presence of Allah? Number two, is it the slaves or those in Allah's presence who will be made females? If I were an angel, I would prefer being called in God's presence rather than his slave. And if I were an angel being a male, I would prefer if only the slaves were made females, were not made females, thank you. So can you see, this does have theological differences, and each one of these could be a theological a treatise right there. Sorry, a PhD thesis. You can unpack these, and we have found 93,000 of these. I'm just showing you one or two, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Chapter 46, verse 15. Isanan, doing good, versus Al-Duri's rendition, which is husnan, beauty. And we have joined on man doing good to his parents, versus, and we have enjoined on man beauty to his parents. Are men supposed to be good, or are we beautiful to our parents? As a parent, I have 3 sons. I would prefer my sons being good rather than just be good looking. 98 verse 6. Bareyati versus al-bare'ati. One is creatures, the other is the innocent. So here we're talking about polytheists who will be in hell, abiding eternally there, and those are the worst of creatures, versus on this side, the people of the scripture, that's us, the polytheists, will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally there, and those are the worst of the innocent. So are we Christians the worst of creatures, or are we innocent? Well, I would prefer to go with Warsh on this one, because I'm a Christian. I would rather be innocent rather than being a polytheist in hell. Can you see how this has huge theological differences? So how can they say that this doesn't even change anything? But hold on a minute. Muslims have never been shown this. So we took these down, just 26 of these down. When was it, Sarah? Was it 2016, right? So 3 years ago. Were you there on the day? Oh, you missed it. I'm going to show you what happened when we took these down to Speaker's Corner.
There is only one Quran, right? And that every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie! Okay, so there are 2 Qurans today, right? 2.
More than 2 Qurans.
More than 2? 3 Qurans?
More than 3 Qurans.
More than 3? 4 Qurans?
There are approximately 26 of the Qurans.
26 different Qurans. Oh, go ahead, start throwing things out. It says they were lied to. They denied it. 2 different readings.
It's the same in Arabic. Read in Arabic.
That's the difference. Look,
it's the same.
And which has the dhamma. The difference is between dhamma and dhamma. Read it. Read it again.
حتى يقول حتى يقول
Read it again. The prophets fought, but by the time you get to the fight, they were killed. That is a huge
attention. Your faces, Muslim people. Your face, come here. Come.
You better go. We're going to make it more and more difficult for you. Well, you can imagine this was certainly a novel occurrence for the Muslims that were there. As you can see, they did not like what they saw. They did not like what they heard. They tried to grab the papers that we had doing a comparison from our hands. They even jostled our cameraman. And then at the end, did you notice there was a tall man? That is Muhammad Hijab. That's he that's saying, come on, pull away, come away, don't listen. He didn't want them to see what they were seeing, and he didn't want them to hear what we were saying.
It was obvious to him that he did not want them to see this and or hear it. And it looks like that was 4 years ago. It looks like he had a crisis of faith, because it was this very thing that we were introducing at the Quran, which he then asked of Yasser Qadi back on June 8th, a month ago, proving that he had not come to terms with it. In 4 years, he hadn't come to terms. Now, he's very well known on the internet there in the YouTube. I think he has over 200,000 subscribers. Very popular on YouTube, very popular on the internet. But if he cannot come up with an answer, and Yasser Qadi over here in the West cannot come up with an answer, can you see the difficulty they're having? Now, it was fascinating because back there in 2016, that wasn't the only time that I just showed you that we took those Qurans, those 26, only 26, down to Speaker's Corner. We did it 2 more times there in August of 2016. The 3rd time we took it down, we almost did not leave. The Muslims were so upset with us that they tried to block us. They tried to put their bodies in front of us. You can see, if you go back a few weeks on Fander Films, I've got it up there. You can go look at the film of what happened. They tried to grab the bag from my hand, broke the strap, and they followed us out all the way to the street because they did not want us to leave with those Qurans. They did not want the world to know this. Little did they know that those Qurans you can buy almost anywhere. If Khatun was able to buy those Qurans, those were her Qurans in 3 different countries from people that have gone there and bought them for her. They don't cost that much. You can still get them today. They're available all over the Arab-speaking world. How did they think by simply grabbing them from us there at Speaker's Corner that they could somehow censor this problem for the rest of the world? Remember, when Muslims don't like something, they either burn it, or they throw it into a river, or they try to hide it under a bed, or in this case, try to grab it from those people who have it. These are any way they can to try to censor, to try to shut down this debate. And this shows me that Muslims have not yet come to terms with these different Qurans. As long as I said earlier, as long as I've known Shabir Ali, he's always only ever talked about one Quran. As long as I've heard any Muslim, they've only ever talked about one Quran. It's only now, in the last month and a half, that they are finally admitting that there are more than one Qurans, and now they're moving to a whole nother narrative, being pushed into a corner, coming with the fact that these are now out in the open, and we have them, and we're going to continue to show them, and we're going to show you just how many differences there are between them. We're going to suggest that Muslims need to come up with a better narrative, because the narrative they come up with now is what Shabir Ali introduced about a month and a half ago, and that is, okay, so we have many different Qurans, but they don't have any difference in doctrine, no difference in belief, and no difference in practice. Those are the 3 things he keeps saying ad nauseum. Without thinking through, he's only looked at 4 or 5. Remember, we've only put up those 4 or 5 that I just showed you just now. That's all we've ever gone public with in these type of public YouTube channels. Khatun's team there in Britain and around the world, Khatun's team has found 93,000 of these. We've only shown 4 or 5. Shabir Ali has been really confronting this one that we found on chapter 98, verse 6, and he's come up with video after video trying to shut that down. Al-Fadi has just run circles around him because Al-Fadi knows the Arabic. Al-Fadi, that's his native tongue. He knows the grammar, and he can say, listen, if you want to just get caught up with just chapter 98, verse 6, we've got another 93,000 that we'd like to show you. There's an awful lot yet to do. But there's something more damaging than this. The fact that Muslims have never admitted this, the fact that the Quran itself makes this claim that it is eternal, the fact that it makes the claim in chapter 10, verse 15, in chapter 15, verse 9, and in chapter 18, verse 27, that Allah preserves the Quran, that God would not let it be corrupted, that He guards it. Over and over again it says He guards it. If that were so, then what does it say about Allah's preservation? What does it say about His guarding? What does it say about His ability to protect His word from corruption? If you have now, not just 1, not just 2, but as many as 30. We've got 26, we're up to 37. Looks like there's an awful lot of even doubles on the ones we do have. I would suggest that Muslims come up with a better narrative, or just stop saying this and admit that the Quran is wrong. The Quran cannot be preserved eternally, and it did not come. The Quran that we have today is not the one that was from Muhammad, is not the one that is from Uthman. It's not even the one that existed in the 7th century or the 8th century. We're going to leave that there for now. It's obvious that Muhammad Hijab has a crisis of faith. It's obvious that Yasser Qadi had a crisis of faith. What we're going to do next, and in my next video, I'm going to show you that even these 30 Qur'ans, different Qira'at, different ahrufs, they are not from Muhammad at all. They do not come from the same time that Muhammad lived, or even the same century. That's for the next video. Listen, this has been Jay, trying to help you unpack this whole problem with Qira'at and ahruf. I hope you now understand why these are different, why these are causing so much damage, and why Muslims have something that we don't have. See, we don't have this problem with the Bible. That claim, that is not something that we have claimed, that it is eternal, or that was sent down to one man over a period of 22 years. We would never make those two claims. We do know that the Bible was, yes, complete when its original form. We don't have the original ones. We don't have the original manuscripts, but we do have, what, over 5,000, over 5,003 to 400 Greek manuscripts. We have 10,000 Latin Vulgates. We have 9,000 in about 11 different languages, and we have about 24,000 manuscripts we can look at, and that's why we know where there are changes, and we know where the changes have come in. We even know when they come in, and we are very transparent about it. We don't sit and berate the world whenever they find these variants. We've known the variants. We tell the people right there in the Bible. You can see Mark chapter 16, verse 9 to 20. There is a variant there that is not found in the earliest Greek manuscripts. So we're quite transparent. And because we do understand that these were written by men, yes, and we also know that if they're written by men, there are many different styles of writing. So we have 4 different testimonies of the life, teaching of Jesus Christ from the last 3 years of his life, from 4 different perspectives, using 4 different sets of idiomatic expressions. So we don't have a difficulty with that. We don't just say there's just one testimony of Jesus Christ. We know there's 4. And 2 of them, Matthew and John, they both were with Jesus Christ for the last 3 years. Matthew and John were right there. They saw what he did. They heard what he said. And they wrote down what they saw and heard. So those are eyewitness accounts. The other 2 got it from the eyewitness accounts. That's why we know that they were all written within 30 to 60 years of Christ's death. Within the 1st century, they were first written. Now, if we were saying that we have more than 4, and we were saying that actually they weren't written within the 1st century, can you imagine how we would defend this? If we today had what Islam is now admitting, what the Yasar Qadis and the Shabir Alis are now admitting, that means we would have about 30 different testimonies of what Jesus said and did. Over 30. And as you're going to find in the next video, and they are not even from the same century that Jesus lived. Therefore, much, much later, 200 to 300 years after Jesus lived. Hold on, we need to get to that. Can you then understand why we're bringing this up? Can you then understand why we're confronting Muslims? Because the claims they have made, they can no longer support. And these claims have been going on for 1,400 years. It's only in the last month and a half that Muslims have finally admitted that there are many different Qur'ans, up to 30 of them. And they, as we're going to find out, do not come from the 7th century at all. Well, this has been good chatting with you. I'll be back again with another video on the Qira'at and the Ahruf. This is Jaden.
What Dr. J uncovered in this video is nothing short of extraordinary. The Qur'an, long thought to exist as a single, perfectly preserved text, actually has a history far more complex than most people realize. With at least 30 recognized versions and countless textual variations, some affecting meaning, grammar, and even theological interpretation, it becomes clear that what we have today is the result of centuries of careful selection, standardization, and preservation. From early manuscripts lacking vowels and diacritical marks to the canonical version established under Hafs, these differences reveal the intricate process of transmission that has been largely hidden from public view. This isn't just a story about ancient texts. It's a story about the power of knowledge, transparency, and historical context. Whether you're exploring faith, history, or scholarship, understanding these variations challenges assumptions and sparks critical reflection. The traditional Islamic narrative about the origin of the Quran has been a lie that even Muslim scholars now recognize as holes in the narrative. The Quran was never preserved as they claimed. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and share this video so others can see it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more Islamic history content. Stay with us as we sift through history to find out what the standard Islamic narrative on the Islamic Awareness website is hiding regarding the origin of Islam. Jesus is Lord.